Welcome to Migrating to the Cloud. What is the cost of doing nothing? So my name's Aaron Rallo. I'm a director and general manager with Amazon Web Services. I'll be starting the presentation today, and then I'll be joined by Adnan Haq, who's a global vice president with Marriott International. And he's going to tell a really great story of their migration journeys and share some other experiences. So I'm excited to share that this is my 8th reInvent. I've been with Amazon for about 4 years, and prior to that, I was at reInvent as a partner, and prior to that, as a customer. So I've been around this scene for quite a while now, and it's really great to have the time to share some stories and some experiences with you all today. So we're going to run through a few agenda items here. We're going to start a little bit on why customers migrate. I'm going to share my personal story when I helped a company migrate and get cloud native. We're going to talk about some lessons learned from the thousands of customers that we've helped to migrate. I'm going to share just a little bit of data around that and tie it back to what are the costs of doing nothing and what are some of the benefits that you get when you're running on AWS. And then I'm going to turn it over to Adnan, who has spent the last 15 plus years helping enterprises like Marriott International, Capital One, and Carrier on their migration journeys. So let's jump in. So why do customers migrate? There's a whole host of reasons. Agility, cost, security, resiliency. We're going to talk in detail about a whole bunch of these as we work through the presentation. What I'd like to do, though, is I'd like to start with a story of my own. And this graph actually led me onto a path that got me here on this stage today. So in 2008, I was running a company that did online photo finishing for major retailers. Many of you have probably used it. Upload your photos to Costco, pick them up in the store an hour later. Those little 4x8 greeting cards that are on almost every US household at Christmas time that get mailed around. All of that ran through our digital imaging platform. And in that business, we geared up and purchased all of our infrastructure to support our busiest day of the year, which was right around US Thanksgiving. And we paid for that infrastructure all year long. And the beauty of that business was that every time somebody uploaded an order and made a print or an order of prints, our company made $1. And the business grew dramatically, but so did our infrastructure costs, to the point that it was costing us 35 cents in infrastructure cost to generate $1 in revenue. That was actually okay for us. We were willing to live with that at the time when our business was growing like mad. We were picking up new retailers, volume was going, it was great. But then we had all the major retailers, and costs became a really big concern. And we were looking at potentially a private equity takeout from the company. So we really wanted to get our costs under control. So we started looking at ways to drive down our costs. And the most obvious way was highlighted to me when I put this graph together that mapped my infrastructure cost as a straight line against my data center compute utilization, which varied based on the volume of my business. This was in 2008. AWS was only 2 years old. I'd love to say that we were able to just pick everything up and move it to AWS in 2008. Frankly, you could do that today. Back then, we had to do, the first thing we had to do was come up with some algorithms to really understand our workload, our compute, our utilization patterns of the servers, and then figure out how to create some auto-scaling groups, which for any of you all that were around doing infrastructure in 2008, you probably know like F5 load balancers had some of this built in, your firewalls had some of this built in, VMware said they had some of this built in, but it was really hard to get working back then. So we ended up having to build a lot of this software on our own to figure this out. A couple of years later, we were able to get it running in the cloud, and it was actually a lot easier. It reduced our burden. But the net effect of that, once we were actually up and running to the place where we really wanted to be, instead of spending 35 cents to deliver $1 in revenue, we were spending a dime. And we were able to build a much more attractive cash flow model on that company. We ended up doing a private equity deal of that company in 2012, and I started at that time a new company called TSO Logic, which was designed purely to help enterprises figure out this problem, identify excess capacity, leverage AWS to have scalable, elastic infrastructure. And in 2019, AWS acquired that company, which got me up here on this stage today. So it's been a pretty wild journey that truly started with a pain point that I experienced, and a pain point that I think many of you likely experience if you have infrastructure in on-premises data centers, the pain point of elasticity and business agility, and we're going to talk about a few more of those things now. So one of the great things about being part of AWS is that we get to help thousands of customers, and we get a front row seat watching large and small enterprises and help them out on their migration journey. So we've learned a bunch of lessons from these, and one of the things that we do for some of our customers that we work closest with is we have this thing called Enhanced Migration Assistance. And when a customer opts in to Enhanced Migration Assistance, we actually can help them with we get visibility into their migration plan, and then we help them along the way where we can to ensure that migration goes on track. And we also get to learn quite a bit of it. So one of the things we did is we took a bunch of data from the migrations where customers have opted in, and we wanted to see what we could learn about migration speed and about some of the things that help migration customers go faster. So I put together this little visualization here that we'll play for you. So this is about 1.5 billion data points from this customer set. And we arranged them all to represent large and small migrations. So a small dot is a small migration. A big dot is a large migration. And the first thing that we were curious about is, does size impact velocity? Can a small migration go as fast as a large? Can a large go as fast as a small? Do all the large ones go slow and all the small ones go fast? And you can see the distribution is actually pretty even. There's almost the same number of large migrations going fast as there are small migrations, and vice versa. So then we took a look at what some of the impacts are of going slow or not starting. So one of the things that we learned from talking with these customers is that customers that are running on-premises environments and then migrated to AWS, when they were running on-prem, they had slower deployment cycles. It was taking them longer to deploy software in their old environment versus the new. We also learned that there was a fair bit of over-provisioning. This is actually something we've known for quite a long time. The server manufacturers did an incredible job over the last decade or two selling us hardware, big, really big hardware, and it led to over-provisioning in the data center. We also saw slower paces of innovation, and we'll talk about why some of these things happened in the next couple of slides. So for the customers that made it to the other side, they benefited from faster deployment, elastic provisioning, and more feature releases. So then we got really curious as to, well, what makes a migration go faster than another if it's not size, right? So one thing we learned is we kept track of all of the customers that did some type of migration assessment. So a migration assessment is where you actually do some discovery, look at the infrastructure that you have in place, maybe put together a business case for migrating those workloads, figure out what it costs on-prem, figure out what it's going to cost on AWS. We have some free tooling. AWS has some free tooling called Migration Evaluator that will do that for you. We have other professional services offerings as well that will do that from we call it a migration readiness assessment. And what we found was the customers that did that, which is represented here by all the purple dots, largely fell either into the fast or the medium migration speed category. So that was an important learning, that customers that do an assessment begin their migration project faster and complete it sooner. The other thing that we took a look at is those that used more than one AWS service. So some customers just migrate to EC2. Interestingly, The customers that go the fastest are also consuming other AWS services. Maybe it's some of our security services, maybe it's EKS, maybe it's ECS, maybe it's Lambda. Amazon Connect is another one that really accelerates migration. But we found the customers that go the quickest were using more than one thing. They weren't just using EC2. And then the last learning that we found, if this thing will press play here. The last learning that we found was that the customers that go the quickest had used either AWS training resources to educate their teams and their staff, or professional services. So those were just some of the things that we learned as we started to pull this data out. We're going to continue to mine this data set. We'll come back with more presentation materials and more insights and learnings. We've got a couple of blog posts that are in the works. So what's the cost of doing nothing? That's kind of our title of the presentation here. And we talked a little bit about some of the areas. And now we'll just drill in and get to a little bit more detail on each of them. The first one is financial. When we talk with customers about migrating to the cloud, the conversation almost always begins with cost. With AWS, customers can trade capital expense for a variable expense. And the variable expense is almost always less expensive than you could do on your own, than customers can do on their own, because of AWS economies of scale. We also know that elasticity is a really important piece of it. With AWS, customers can provision resources to meet business demand without having to have people order, procure, rack, and stack hardware. You get a savings benefit back from that. Not only are you saving on the cost, but you're also saving for the people time that actually have to procure, rack, and stack, and patch, and maintain that infrastructure for those busiest peak seasons of a business, like in my example. When you're running in AWS and when you can quickly spin up resources and deprovision resources, you get all of that time back. And that's time back that could be spent by your highly valuable IT teams on work that's going to differentiate their business and add true customer value. So we see much more innovation happening when customers are running on AWS versus on premises. And as I mentioned before, that 84% over provisioning is a very real thing in on-prem data centers. The other thing that I didn't mention here, but zombie servers, we talk a lot about servers that just aren't doing anything inside of our data centers. At least 20% in almost every environment we go, and we've looked at hundreds of thousands of servers. We published some research on that a while back with some folks at Stanford, and it's just remarkable how much zombie servers there are out there. I mentioned that the conversation always starts with cost, or almost always starts with cost. The biggest benefit, actually, though, that customers see is agility. With AWS, you can quickly spin up resources as you need them. Hundreds, even thousands of servers can be spun up in minutes. And what this means is that customers can quickly develop and roll out new applications. The other benefit is that there's over 200 AWS services that help you build applications faster. And by using a combination of the services that are available and the elasticity of the infrastructure and the ease of spinning up and provisioning resources, you can not only deploy new applications faster, but you can also experiment with a lot less risk and with increased frequency, knowing that if an experiment fails, you can just deprovision the resources without continuing to incur the cost. We find, when we looked across the customers that have gone through successful migrations, we found that when they were on-prem, their developing times were 50% slower. It was taking them more time to deploy software, more human time to actually deploy software to their servers. And it took 39% more people to do those deployments. When you get to the other side on AWS, we see 2.3x feature velocity on an annualized basis, right? So delivering twice as many releases per year for our features, for your customers. Another reason is resiliency. AWS enables customers to deploy globally in minutes. We have a concept of a region, which is a physical location around the world where we cluster data centers. Each group of logical data centers, we call it an availability zone. The AWS cloud spans 96 availability zones in 30 geographic regions. We have announced plans to release 15 more availability zones in 5 more regions in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Thailand, and Israel. When customers think holistically about resiliency, it's an improvement in both their brand by having less downtime and their bottom line by having less downtime. Good resilient applications are really hard to build and deploy in on-premises environments. And it's something we've gotten really good at helping our customers do on AWS. We have a number of services, disaster recovery service, resiliency hub, that help customers do this. I'd be remiss not to discuss security. Security at AWS will always be and is our top priority. AWS is architected to be the most flexible and secure cloud computing environment available. It's built to satisfy requirements of military, global banks, and other highly sensitive environments. And the same hardware and software that we use is used to build every AWS region that we have. So all of the technology that we use to satisfy those most secure, highly sensitive workloads gets sent out to the benefit of all AWS customers in every AWS region. When you're running on premises, you have full responsibility for the security model. With AWS, you have a shared responsibility model. AWS maintains the host hardware all the way in the virtualization layer, all the way down to the physical facility that the service runs in. And the customer is responsible for building secure applications. AWS offers tools, best practices, and guidance that can be leveraged by our customers for building secure applications. And we have partners that have over 300 tools and features that also help for everything from data encryption to governance and to controls. So why does speed matter? Let's just take a look at a customer with 1,000 servers. We look at the cost of running on premises and we see 0 to minimal annual savings. We estimate from the data that we have that it's about 29 releases per year are being done. And it takes approximately 31 people hours per release. And then we look at a customer that either started early or has completed a migration. Same customer, same 1,000 servers, about $1.2 million per year in financial savings, doing 112 releases per year, and on average, 8 hours of human time per release. This gives a material advantage for innovation, business agility, and cost for these customers. So as we wrap things up here, the cost of doing nothing is a financial cost, as we discussed, but it's also agility, it's also higher security burdens, and it's also you lose the ability to easily build resilient applications. So there's an awful lot of really great benefits that I shared with you today, some from my personal experience and some from the customers, the thousands of customers that we've helped migrate. What I'd like to do now is introduce Adnan Haq, who's the Global Vice President for Marriott International. And he's going to take us on a journey that he's been on now for 15 plus years as he's helped many companies on this migration path. Adnan?
Thank you, Aaron. Good afternoon, everyone. As Aaron mentioned, my name is Adnan Haq, and I work for Marriott. I oversee infrastructure, platforms, cloud, DevSecOps practice. Prior to Marriott, I was with Capital One, I was with Carrier, similar transformational journeys over the years. So what I'm going to do is build upon some of the key themes and walk you through the journey that Marriott has been going through. right? So we are going through a digital transformation. We're also going through a technology transformation. We want to do it the right way. We want to reinvent the hospitality industry. And as we set new standards, we want to make sure that we start from the platform and infrastructure there. So a little bit about Marriott. Marriott started in 1927, spelled with 2 R's and 2 T's. That's one of the most common questions that we get. It was the humble beginnings with a 9-stool root beer stand in Washington, D.C. That was started by Mr. Marriott and his wife. Over the years, they got into the restaurant business. They got into the in-flight catering business. And it wasn't until 1957 when they really got into the hotel business. Around the mid-'80s, Marriott came out with the slogan of one company, many brands, to really segment their customer base and make sure that they can offer different experiences for different customer segments, from long-term stays to business traveler to our luxury collections, such as the Cosmopolitan here in Vegas or the Atlantis in Bahamas. Those are all Marriott properties. Today, Marriott is the largest hospitality company. We have over 8,000 hotels spread around 131 countries. We have everything from luxury hotels to homes and villas, and all the way to our luxury yacht collection that we just recently launched in Europe. With COVID, as everyone knows, the hospitality industry was one of the hardest hit, right? And Marriott was no exception. At one point, we lost 80 to 90% of our revenues, and it was difficult times. But what that made us recognize was how important it is to reduce our fixed costs, right? And to move more towards pay-as-you-go model, right? So that was the time when we started thinking about our digital transformation, our technology transformation, and really from the infrastructure perspective, ways to reduce our costs for the infrastructure, right? What we didn't want was for factors that are outside of our control, whether it's the economy, whether it's the pandemic, right? Hopefully we won't have another one, but it is a reality. During those times, we want the ability to reduce our capital expenses. So Marriott being a powerhouse of innovation, both on the product side and the business side, but also on the technology side, we felt that we really had to innovate and we really had to figure out a bold forward-looking way of reducing our customer and of reducing our infrastructure costs. That's when cloud came into the picture, right? As we got into more details of how we're going to start this journey, we started thinking about, well, what is the scale of cloud adoption that we're going to go through? The only thing that we clearly knew was that we wanted to move away from the legacy way of operating. Right? We wanted to move away from request-driven, manually intensive, procedural operational functions to more of a self-service and automated way of doing things. We wanted to move away from handoffs to teams relying on rhythms and collaboration. Right? On the application side, we want to move away from our monolithic applications, and we want to move more towards event-driven, microservices-based architecture. Right? Similarly, on the infrastructure side, we want to move away from our capital-intensive infrastructure acquisition process and data centers to more of a pay-as-you-go model that is elastic, that gives us the ability to scale up and down as we need. So as we looked at all those things, we felt that cloud is really the way to go. So we made a bold statement and we said, we're going to go all in on cloud. We're going to exit our data centers. We're not going to be in the data center business. For us, that's a commodity service because we're not into infrastructure. We're into hospitality, right? So why not let the experts at AWS manage what they do best, while we focus on building that differentiation for our guests and our property owners. Marriott's beginning of this journey was a fairly typical one, right? Many organizations, when they first adopt cloud, they don't come up with some grand holistic cloud plan, right? There's no major strategy on how they're gonna go and adopt cloud. It usually starts a lot of times because of the sheer frustration the application teams and the product teams are going through when they are asking for infrastructure, and that infrastructure takes time, right? Your product cycles are much longer. So they try to circumvent the process, and they try to go and start cloud on their own, right? What that does is it brings out a shadow IT. And when companies find that out, they try to shut it down. They try to govern it, right? They set policies where they say, we're not gonna go cloud native. We're not going to allow you to use every service that is available on the cloud, right? Rather than focusing on the exact opposite of allowing the companies to innovate at a faster pace using those cloud native services, right? There's no need to install a database when you have a relational database service or Aurora available that's ready for you to innovate on, right? That actually stops those IT infrastructure organizations from focusing on what really matters, cost. Cloud can be cheap, but cloud can also be very expensive if the costs are not controlled, right? Similarly, the speed of innovation. Cloud can really speed up innovation, like Aaron said, up to 2 times faster in innovation. What I have seen is 4 to 6 times faster in innovation, but not if you lock it down to the point where you're basically hosting a data center on cloud, right? So that lack of focus really results in pushing the companies in the wrong direction. And that wrong direction, when it spirals into high costs, companies start to backtrack. And many companies actually fall back on their data centers because they say, oh, cloud is too expensive, right? It didn't really give us the innovation that we were thinking. But what they don't realize is it's because they did not adopt cloud the right way, right? There's an overemphasis on costs as well, right? It's always a cost comparison. Is it cheaper? Is it cheaper to host on-prem? Without recognizing the fixed cost and the capital cost and how that impacts your cash flow and your ability to invest in areas of innovation that create differentiation for your customers. One of the things that we noticed was, as companies that I have noticed at Marriott and outside of Marriott as well, is that when companies finally do start putting together this holistic strategy on their cloud adoption, they try to optimize for everything. Right? They want cost reduction. They want innovation. They want to move beyond their physical data center limits. They want tech debt remediation. And all of those are benefits that can be gained from cloud. But the challenge is that this journey is long, it's complex, and when you try to optimize for everything, you end up optimizing for nothing, right? So it's extremely important, in our opinion, in our viewpoint, that companies really need to figure out what they want, what they're trying to solve for. What are they optimizing for as they go through this cloud journey? At Marriott, we're really optimizing for differentiators, right? But it's the same journey that I have gone through in other companies that you see on the 2 ends of the screen, where the optimization was for different drivers, right? So a top 10 financial company, for example, they wanted to reinvent themselves as a technology company. So they set really high benchmarks. And unless their application was broken into microservices, event-driven, open source technologies, containerized, they didn't want it to go on cloud. Well, the result was 8 to 10 years in the transformation, right? But that was acceptable because their goal was to totally gut everything out and redo it in the modern way. Another example, speed. And speed and cost was important because we knew that our per unit cost of our VM on-prem was twice as much as the cost of that VM on cloud. So the strategy was to move everything to cloud as fast as we can, take that 50% savings, reinvest that into modernizing our applications, right? Again, same journey, same destination, different things that you're optimizing for. One is going for speed and cost reductions, while the other one is going for complete transformation. At Marriott, we're looking at differentiators. So there are platforms and there are commodity services that we feel are fine to run the way they are running, and we're moving them. And as a result, we're working closely with AWS and using some of their migration readiness assessment, their MAP program. We've built the migration factory with their assistance to accelerate our migrations, right? Over the course of the last 6 months or so, we've moved over 1,200 VMs to AWS. But we're also innovating. We're rewriting where it matters. We're rewriting our digital areas where the customers are transacting with our systems, right? We're deploying cloud platforms across the globe as we're doing that. So we have some aggressive goals. We feel that in the next 1.5 to 2 years, we're going to move over 4,500 VMs. But at the same time, we're going to redo many of our digital assets. We're going to rebuild them. Right? These differentiators we group into 3 main categories. The first one is really enablement of our platforms. Build once and reuse everywhere. Right? There's no need to continue to build these snowflakes and treat everything as a separate entity. So we're really focused on building those platforms that enable us. The second one is innovation, acceleration of our innovation. Right? We don't want to go and build everything. We want to actually use configuration over code. And how do you do that? By acquiring solutions that are already out there, right? Which leads us into the third group, which is differentiating our technologies, right? Buying the commodity and building the differentiation. When we interact with our customers, that is a differentiated service. That's where we want to invest and re-architect. But when we're buying, when we are making a reservation, right, that's a commodity service. There are enough solutions out there. We can purchase it. We can acquire that commodity. Some of the prerequisites that we have identified that we had to go through, and sometimes we learned it the hard way, right? Not many companies do. But identifying clear success criteria. And this kind of ties back to what are you optimizing for on cloud, right? Identifying the key business drivers and acceptance criteria because of which you're migrating. Because again, cloud is vast, so you can take it in any direction you want to take it in. So you have to be very clear. And that has to be defined into a common vision. And that vision is extremely important at the top of the house, across the executives, across the C-suite. They have to be saying the exact same thing. If that vision is really compartmentalized at a department level, it results in clashes, right? So you don't want to do that. You want to have a common vision for the organization. And you have to be bold about deprioritizing some of your work. That is not going to differentiate your journey to the cloud and the reasons why you're doing it, right? And then lastly, favoring simplicity. So every company that finally accepts adoption of cloud wants to go with the most complex hybrid multi-cloud environment, right? We're going to have our data centers, we're going to have our cloud, we're going to be cloud agnostic. As a result, we're never going to use a cloud native service. We're going to be across Azure and AWS and GCP and OCI, right? And they overcomplicate the whole thing. It's a multi-year journey. It's a long journey. It's not a destination, right? It's a way of living. So as companies get into that, it's extremely important to keep it simple. Use the native services. Use the relational database services. Use Aurora. Don't run away from it. It's not going to bite you. Some of the benefits that we have observed over time As Aaron mentioned, there's speed, there's automation, there's cost, there's scalability. These are things that people realize, they see, right? They put it in the business case does a financial analysis, it spits out a result, and you make a decision on whether to move forward, not, and how to scale it. But the unanticipated benefits are equally important. In fact, in my opinion, probably more important, right? Cloud adoption is really a catalyst for organizational transformation. When you start using those native services that AWS offers, and you see your cycle of innovation speed up, you really figure out that, hey, this long waterfall project management, it's not going to cut out for us, right? And teams automatically move into more iterative development. They automatically move into scaled agile framework, agile methodologies, extreme programming, you name it, right? But more iterative methodologies. Similarly, your talent upskilling comes with it. As teams migrate to these cloud platforms, and AWS being one of the most advanced cloud platforms, they have to be upskilled. Training comes in to picture, right? So, and the best way to train is the hands-on training when you're doing the work, right? But while that is happening, new hiring comes in. Marriott is hiring. We have a lot of roles open right now. And it's not just on the engineering side. What you start to see is that it actually puts pressures in other non-technical areas to transform. Your finances have to transform. Your recruiting processes have to transform. Your HR policies have to transform, right? So as you're moving forward, you start opening those opportunities. Like at Marriott, we have hundreds of positions open right now on Marriott.com, right? Constantly looking for talent because you have to infuse that talent from outside. Similarly, reinvestment opportunities, improved security and resiliency, the number of security products that are available on cloud, you can't even match that in a data center environment. One other thing that we have recognized is that cloud really isn't a destination. It's a journey, right? And what that means is that you have to constantly measure your progress. How do you do it? By building KPIs. If you don't have your KPIs, you get lost in that jungle, right? So you have to build KPIs, and you have to constantly see how you're going to optimize your environment, right? At Marriott, just this year alone, we've reduced our run rate by $10 million. It's all on AWS where we have made the reduction by bringing in advanced products, some of the machine learning capabilities that they have, right? By signing for more discount programs with AWS. Similarly, we have reduced our cycle times. What used to take us 30+ days to provision now takes us 30 minutes. Right? So once the product teams have approval to build a new product, they have the funding, they have the security approvals, it takes us 30 minutes for us to create the baseline environment for them where they can launch their infrastructure. But not just that, it's secure by design. We have 60+ controls built into that environment. That's fully automated, so there's no circumventing it, right? There's no picking and choosing. That goes into your environment right away. So it's secure by design. Our adoption journey, where Marriott is right now, it can really be grouped into 3 major areas. We have the tactical, right, which is where we were in the data center. We're moving more to the operational phase, and this is more focused on cloud, right? The cloud's operational phase. That's where we are right now. Where we really want to move to is the efficient space, where innovation really picks up, where our cycle times to build out new products, new differentiation for our guests, for our customers, it really gets faster, right? And in order for us to do that, we are actually deploying cloud all around the globe. So before, we were primarily, our technology operations were primarily based in North America. So now you can think about how one of our guests sitting in Singapore is transacting with our systems through our technology, through our digital portals, right? That transaction has to come all the way around the globe and then go back. by having the ability to launch our cloud platforms within a matter of weeks around the globe, as we have over the course of 2022 in Singapore, in Tokyo, in London, coming up in Frankfurt, right? We can actually move our assets closer to our guests. We can move it closer to our properties. That totally changes the way they transact with our systems, their experience. Plus, it gives us the ability in future to really start to further segment that market, because the culture in Asia and what they expect from a hospitality company is very different from the culture in EMEA or North America, right? So it gives us that flexibility. If we were still in the traditional data center environment, right, which we are trying to exit, which we will exit from, just imagine the costs of those physical assets. Going out and starting a data center, that's not cheap, right? Some of the key lessons that we have learned through this process are, first of all, having front-loaded plans. There will be failures, right? And we should be ready for those failures. But making sure that we have a bias for action. Planning is extremely important, but planning is not going to get you the results. You have to jump in. You have to migrate. You have to modernize. All of that has to start, right? So don't get into analysis paralysis. Rationalizing your applications, right? It's a new, pristine environment that you will build, right? Hopefully, you'll utilize some of the advanced services and templates that AWS provides. Professional services come and can build for you. And as you build that pristine environment, keep it clean. Rationalize your applications, clean up your data, purge your data. You don't want to move your tech debt over to the cloud, right? It doesn't help. This is your opportunity to really clean it up. But at the same time, not at the cost of speed. Speed is extremely important because that is what will upskill your talent, right? Your associates. That is what will attract new talent to come into your company and help you. Similarly, being very stubborn about the benchmarks, the minimum benchmarks that you have, right? Don't give up on that. Keep it clean. At Marriott, anything that goes on our AWS environment must be either containerized or it must be a native service, right? There is no exception. It must have a full pipeline, must have CI/CD capabilities, right? There's no exception. So there are certain things that we're very stubborn about and that everyone should be that is actually starting this journey. Similarly, planning for some of the transient cost surge. As you're migrating, there will be a transient cost surge. And the key word here is transient, right? A lot of times when companies don't plan for that up front, they get concerned when those costs surge. But those costs are surging because, first of all, you're migrating, that costs money. You're duplicating your systems, at least for a short duration as you migrate, right? So you have two systems running, that costs money. And then similarly, you learn to optimize over time, right? And initially, as you do the pay-as-you-go model, you will feel that your costs are higher until you can actually optimize them. But that cost surge lasts for a couple of years, right? Knowing that up front and setting those expectations up front are extremely important. Otherwise, many companies around year 2, year 3 say, oh my God, that's so expensive, and they start moving back to the data centers, right? And then lastly, automation and DevSecOps capabilities. This is the time to build that. Automate. That's why you're moving to cloud. Without that, it makes no sense, right? Otherwise, it's going to be a data center on the cloud. So I'll wrap this up with some of the costs that we would have seen had we not taken this journey, had we not started this journey, right? We're still in the middle of this transformational journey. But I mentioned the $10 million in annual run rate reduction, right, in 2022 alone. We wouldn't have seen that had we not moved to the cloud. 80% compute wastage, like Aaron mentioned. Everyone builds their systems, especially large enterprises, for those peak times when you need that capacity, right? Cloud actually totally changes the way you start looking at things, and you start working on minimum capacity that's needed. The reason is because it gives you elasticity. You can scale up and down very quickly, right? So you don't have to build that peak capacity that's just sitting there idle majority of the year. At Marriott, we estimate just simple math of $10 million in run rate reduction over a course of 5 years. That's $50 million in lost reinvestment opportunity that we can invest towards building products for our guests and for our property owners that differentiate them, right? So Marriott, at its peak, was opening one hotel every 14 hours. So you can see the speed at which we need the infrastructure. Purchasing it, shipping it, installing it, that all takes time. But if you can have turnkey solutions on cloud that are pushed closer to those properties, right, into those continents, then you have a much faster pace at which you can launch, right? Similarly, resiliency, another area that we are very focused on. For every second that are at peak volumes, for every second that our systems are down and people can't make a reservation, we lose $8,000 per second, right? So it's extremely important for us to have those resilient systems. And that resiliency is built in. That security is built in when you launch on the cloud, right? If you design it the right way. The product innovation cycles, we talked about that. The high fixed costs of infrastructure, right? For every critical system that we had to build a DR for, there's double the costs. You have 10 servers running for your production. You have another 8 to 10 servers sitting for DR, just for that disaster to occur. You use AWS's DR service, you pay almost nothing. It continues to sync up automatically. It remains synced. Your data is always available, and you can turn it up at a moment's notice, and you don't pay anything, right? It's minimal costs. Reducing the cycle time, right? Just like at Marriott, from 30 days to 30 minutes. And that was all done within a matter of a few minutes. That automation was extremely important for us. All right, so with that, I will tell you that Marriott is hiring, and we have a lot of roles open. Would love to have some of you come and join us in this journey. It's a once-in-a-lifetime journey, but I'm open for questions. Aaron, if you want to come back.
Thank you all for coming. Note that there is a survey. Thank you.